Guys, today I'll go over many Nahida themes and I'll try to explain how much of a must she is for these compositions. Just to catch your attention real quick, let's talk Nahida carry. This one can be played in two different ways, a full-on Quicken theme or a Quickbloom theme. On this theme, the focus for Nahida is her own damage and it's actually pretty good. As a reminder, while Nahida doesn't need to be on field to hurt opponents with her elemental skill, so her biggest source of damage, being on field actually helps her amplify it. That's because she will be receiving the elemental mastery bonus from her elemental burst, and this is great of course. Clearly she is no Al-Hatem, but she's still pretty good in this role. Also, her normal attacks that are pretty weak as a baseline actually end up doing nice damage through the spread procs. The strongest team I found for this role is the very recent Quickbloom team with Furina, which you can play with Nahida, Koki and Fischl, or Baijo, Raiden and Nahida. The double electro compositions are generally the ones that maintain the quicken status on opponents most consistently, so if you want to maximize Nahida's and electro units damage the most, that's the way to play. Alternatively, you can go for a more classic quicken composition with Nahida, Yaya, Fischl and Yae, something like that. For the Quickbloom team I've talked about, if you want you can replace Furina with either Yelan or Shinjo, but by doing that, since their hydro application is higher, you'll lose in quicken uptime on opponents, and if you use them, it will be just much wiser for you to use a full send Hyperbloom team. I like to call this one the random bullshit go, because whatever you do with this team, you're just going to end up killing all opponents very easily. The best way to play this is still by keeping Nahida on field and by using a double Hydro core to generate as much Hydro application as possible that turns into blooms and then Hyperblooms. The most popular fourth slot for this team is Cookie, because she consolidates the role of being able to heal your team and also trigger the Hyperblooms. The thing with this team is that it's very free to play friendly, because the biggest source of damage here is Hyperblooms, and you can simply maximize their output by farming elemental mastery artifacts for your electro character. In this role, since Nahida is really just applying Dendro here, she can be replaced by other on-field Dendro appliers like Al-Hatem or Baijo. Baijo in particular is a good one because it consolidates the roles of applying Dendro and healing, and this last one is pretty nice because it allows you to be more flexible with the electro slot. You can, for example, replace Cookie with Raiden. However, the extra healing comes more in handy when you're playing a Burgeon team. In fact, by simply replacing your electro applier with a pyro applier, you can play a Burgeon team by using the exact same core basically. It's pretty nice. The pyro unit I like the most here is Toma because he has pretty long uptime with his burst, but it's not as durable as the Hyperbloom teams because Burgeon have a recoil damage. You can sort of alleviate this by giving Nahida a weapon like Prototype Ember, which gives her healing utility, but it's just much better to use a character like Baijo here instead of her to be more durable. Before I move on, let me remind you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet and you enjoy my content, because it really helps me notice your support. Another role where Nahida is really strong is when she's played as a sub DPS for Quickbloom team. The thing is, Nahida just is the best Dendro player in the game, and it's not even close honestly. And on top of that, she also buffs the on-field character to her elemental burst, and she also deals pretty nice damage herself, especially in AoE. Usually when people talk Quickbloom carries, they just look at Al-Hatem or Sino because they just have a lot of personal damage that they can deal, and they just fit so well in this team. For both of these carries, the recent addition of Furina to the game really helped them step up, and the reason is that Furina's Hydro application is just balanced enough to allow you to generate a nice amount of blooms while still maintaining a pretty consistent quicken uptime. And in a way, Furina's addition also allowed alternatives to shine compared to Nahida because of the healing she requires to maximize her buffing. So for example, if you replace Nahida with Baijo and Al-Hatem teams, it's not as bad as it was before, it's actually pretty solid. And for the same reason, a character like Dori that at Constellation 6 becomes able to heal the whole team through normal attacks is actually a nice carry for the Quickbloom teams with Furina and Nahida. This is actually pretty funny to play. Dori's elemental skill grants her an electro infusion effect on her normal attacks for 3 seconds, and it has a cooldown of 9 seconds, so To use it consistently, you need the Thundering Fury set on her to spam the Elemental skill, but it feels pretty nice because it's so free to play. And I mean it in the sense that it doesn't really require much thinking, it has a pretty nice base damage, and it's pretty much an immortal type of team because you really have a lot of hitting coming on a team-wide sense. Also, since Furina's elemental skill doesn't require any kind of on-field attack to be triggered unlike Shincho or Yanan, she's a much better fit for a character like Tighnari that just uses charge attacks while on field. It feels pretty great honestly because of course any team where you have Nahida and Furina as a baseline feels great, which is good for a character like Tighnari that until now was mostly tied to quicken teams. Alternatively, you can go the route of using a Hydra on-field carry for these types of teams and just play Hyperbloom really. It's a pretty popular role for a character like Ayato for example, so you do Ayato, Yelan or Furina or Shincho with the Nahida and an Electro character, but it's not really that advantageous compared to other options because while the theoretical advantage of having a Hydra on-fielder is that you get more application compared to Hydra off-fielders, the reality is just that characters like Shincho and Yelan can still apply more compared to characters like Ayato or Neuvillette, so there is no advantage in that sense. Also, since you're playing Nahida off-field and not on-field, you're getting less Dendro application, which means fewer Hyperblooms. It's still not bad if you want to give a character like Ayato a nice on-field role, but for a character like Neuvillette, it's pretty much a waste to me, because in his case, his damage potential is so high that wasting 2 slots for Hyperblooms generation that is not even that good to begin with is just nonsensical to me, but whatever. Next, some quicken teams. In this role, Nahida works pretty much like she works on the sub DPS roles for Quickbloom, in that she's mostly off-field and she's buffing the on-field character with her burst, which is very significant for characters like Ultheitam for example. This specifically applies to Dendro units more than Electro units because they don't have many buffers in the game. So characters like Ultheitam, Tighnari, in quicken teams, if you want to maximize their spread damage, Nahida is just very good. And honestly, quicken teams are pretty much underrated to me because while they might not have as high of a damage floor as Quickbloom teams have, they are very nice to use. The reason is that as a reaction, quicken is pretty easy to maintain, so in general the teams are not hard to play, and they're also quite flexible rotations wise, like Ultheitam, Tighnari, they can both play in very flexible rotations that allow you to adjust to opponents very easily. Regarding the rest of the team slots, I like Zhongli a lot on these teams because, as I said before, Dendro units don't have many buffers, so you can play Zhongli on this team and it doesn't really feel as much as a damage loss as it feels usually because you have pretty restricted options. And this is very good because you can play a shielder as good as he is on a team where it doesn't feel as a damage loss, so it's just optimal. Meanwhile, for the quicken teams where you want to prioritize the quicken damage dealt by the Electro units, so Aggravate, the situation is a bit different. So, for example, I'm talking about the Yae official teams, the Genshin official, the Raiden official, or even something like a Sino Aggravate. All of these teams work fine with Nahida, it's nice, but there are also pretty nice alternative options that can be just as good, if not better. The reason is that in this scenario you have characters like Yayao, Baiju or Kirara who can guarantee the uptime of quicken while also providing defensive support. This type of role consolidation they provide allows you to slot characters like Kazuha and Sucrose in these teams much more easily, while Nahida, for example, if you want to play Nahida, Fischl and Yae, then you have to play a defensive option to complete the team, and that can be a character like Zhongli, who is just way inferior to Kazuha. What I'm trying to say is that while Nahida is for sure better offensively than characters like Baiju, Yaya or Kirara, the gap that there is between a character like Kazuha and Zhongli is just wider. So Nahida is nice here, but not really a must-have by any means. Then you have the Nilou teams, so the Bloom teams that only allow you to use Dendro and Hydro characters. On these teams, Nahida is very good, because since Bloom is something that as a reaction scales very well in AoE, having something like Nahida's elemental skill at your disposal that applies Dendro on all opponents very consistently just increases your damage floor by a lot. While Nahida isn't an actual must for Nilou, since you can really play a lot of alternatives, you really only need Dendro and Hydro applications on these teams, so you can play like Ultheitam on field, or even Yaya and Baiju, and it will still be good. But Nahida just makes it very consistent because as a character, she is very comfortable to use. Lastly, Nahida's elemental skill application is very good to maintain burning on opponents. Burning is something that makes the pyro aura very stable on opponents, so it's commonly used as setup for amplifying reactions like vaporize or melt. In these situations, Nahida's value doubles because her elemental burst can provide elemental mastery for the active character, which is incredibly good for amplifying reactions. Neuvillette Vaporize is a good example of a team like this, and it was actually very popular before Furina came out because it allowed you to maximize damage ceiling in a way that the other Neuvillette teams just couldn't. And pretty interestingly, the damage ceiling Neuvillette has on these teams is still higher to the one he has on Furina teams, so that is that. Honestly, if you want to play him, but you want to save Furina for another team, this is surely a team I can personally recommend. Melt Ganyu is another good one. Even though somebody like Shenling can easily provide enough pyro application for Ganyu to melt consistently alone even without burning, it's still good because it allows you to be more consistent in AoE scenarios when the opponents spread out or something. It just makes the pyro aura more consistent. Alright, I'm done. I could honestly go on and on about Nahida teams, like I haven't talked about Raiden Quickbloom, Fridge, Razor, multi-element Bloom or something, and there are honestly so many things you can do with this character Nahida because Dendro application is so great in the meta. I just wanted to give many great examples so you can have a good understanding of what she can do.